Welcome back to Globalogues. So this episode is kind of a supplementary episode. It's not really part of the sort of ordinary flow of the second season, or really any season for that matter, because it's just it's a set of a background information on what we're going to be talking about on Globalogues and how and why. You know, as you may remember from the intro to the second season, I mentioned that we're going to be exploring this idea that I've created called narratives, global narratives. While, you know, the stories obviously don't belong to anyone in particular, the concept of the narrative, as I'm defining it and using it here, is something that I've created. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time walking you through what that is, how it works, blah, 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 so that, you know, it'll make a little more sense. Well, I hope it'll make sense anyway, but maybe this will make it a little bit easier to follow stuff, or just get yourself sort of prepared for what's coming, or if you're, say, coming into Globalogues some time down the road, to come back and look at how we sort of laid it all out here to begin with. So, the Narratives Project is something that I began on my own a few years ago, just as an intellectual exercise. I wanted to see how many ongoing major stories around the world in politics, business, economics, security affairs, social affairs, so on and so forth, going on anywhere that I could think of and identify and analyze and be able to, you know, put down on paper. And it started pretty simply, and I could come up with, I don't know, you know, 50 or so, and then it expanded and expanded and expanded, and now I've got about 250 of them. You know, divided the world up into 9 regions, divided up, you know, you thought of about 15 or so industries, about 8 or so topics, and you know, tried to categorize all these ongoing stories. So let's take a look at how all that works and how it's going to play out in the course of Globalogues. In each region, you know, you've got a number of ongoing stories. Like, you know, for example, let's take a look at the list, right? You know, this is just sort of a spreadsheet that I put together. You know, list what's going on in North America. Well, there's one. You know, shale oil and North America. You know, how will it transform the North American economy? Obviously, you know, this is something that started several years ago. It'll continue into the future. There are many different players involved. There are some people who say we shouldn't be doing it, other people who say we should be doing it more, and one way or another it's going to affect a lot. Then if we switch over to, you know, Middle East, North Africa, there we look at the chart, there's, you know, Turkey and Erdogan, limits of the new Sultanate. You know, we touched on Recep Tayyip Erdogan a few times in the first season, and his efforts at concentrating more power in himself. And now, as things are developing in Turkey, there's the question of just how far will this go? Will there be pushback against him that's substantive or not? And, you know, so once again, a big ongoing story. Another one, if we go down to Sub-Saharan Africa, there's the question of the ANC and South Africa, the African National Congress and South Africa after Mandela. You know, Nelson Mandela died a few years ago, and in his absence, a number of different factions within the African National Congress, which has run the place since apartheid ended, have started going after each other, and what's this going to mean for the future of South Africa? Each one of these narratives has, you know, different people competing for one you know, aim or another. It's got structural barriers that stand in their way. It's got outside interests that want to influence it. You know, each one is dramatic, to put it another way. You know, you could dramatize this. In analyzing this stuff, it's very important to me and to my approach to all this to assess these interests dispassionately. That not to say, well, this is bad or this is good. You know, once you analyze it, maybe then you can apply your own moral rubric at the end. But, you know, even if you're talking about something like ISIS, you know, you want to assess what are their interests, how are they pursuing them, what do they see as vital to achieving those interests, and what will they do to achieve them. And that's the kind of analysis that I want to be able to bring to this without putting too much of a bent or too much of a spin on it. The sort of broader point of these narratives and why it is that I tried to develop them as an intellectual exercise and why it is that I'm sharing them with you and what it is I hope we can get out of it is to try to explore and then maybe even drive home the point that, you know, where we are in any particular socio-political economic situation is the consequence of choices that were made by individuals pursuing interests at various points in the past. Some of them directly related, some of them indirectly related. But each one of them is a kind of a thread that you can trace backwards, and you can see the influences on it and how they go forward. And that by understanding how the different threads wove together to create the situation that exists now, it's possible to gain a better understanding of what choices are made now, by whom, or by what, for what reason, that will lead to what kind of outcome. And so, by doing all this, you might end up in a situation where the information that you see out there happening in the world doesn't seem like so much noise or fluff or incomprehensible nonsense, but rather the actions that are the consequence of choices. And getting your arms around those choices can make you a much more active participant in the public life that all of this together constitutes. That was the narratives, and see you guys with the next episodes. Bye-bye.